We will call the January 10th Common Council meeting to order. Ms. Wiles, will you do the pledge?
I would be happy to, Mr. President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Lees, will you call the roll?
Mr. Ayers.
Present.
Mr. Boyce.
Present.
Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. O'Connor. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Schwartz.
Present.
Mr. Sparks.
Present.
Ms. Wiles.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Awesome. Approval of the executive session memorandum from December 20th, 2022.
Move to approve the memorandum.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the memorandum. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Approval of the minutes from our December 20th, 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There is a motion to approve the minutes from December 20th. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Approval of the minutes from our January 3rd organization meeting.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes from our January 3rd organization meeting. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I would move to amend the agenda to add miscellaneous 3A, council to consider acceptance of conflict of interest disclosures.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to amend the agenda to add miscellaneous number 3A, council to consider acceptance of a conflict of interest disclosure. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0.
I'd move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. I do not have any, but if you do, there are slips right outside the doors, and you can hand those to Ms. Lees over there, and we will hear those throughout the meeting. Council committee reports. First up is roads. Mr. Ayers.
Thank you. Council committee met on 1/6. Mr. Peterson and Mr. O'Connor and myself were present. Mr. O'Connor was present by, what's that called?
Teams.
Teams meeting. Mr. Boyce was unable to make the meeting. Ms. Lees was there also with the clerk's office, Ms. Crupsey with engineering, her staff, and Ms. Johnson. Street rehabilitation program, we received good news. We received $1 million award from the Community Crossings Grant on 12/6 of 22. That project's set to bid February 23. It will include Allisonville Road from Summerwood to Wellington Parkway entirety, Stony Ridge subdivision entirety, partial North Harbor subdivision, and Howe Place subdivision to Howe Road, 146th and Greenfield Avenue, State Road 37 and 16th Street. The Hamilton County projects we talked about was 146th Street over Allisonville interchange. That's going to be a rough project, but it needs to be done. That's going to start in 2020, or start this year at some point. They're letting the bid early 23. There will be a closure of Allisonville Road for approximately 3 months, but that won't happen until, or they're anticipating the spring of 2024. NDOT project, State Road 37, 141st Street. That's going to bid in the fall. And it's, I guess that's the interchange work that they're doing down on 37. It's also becoming may have already become a right in, right out down there. Has anybody traveled it recently? It's supposed to happen real quick.
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
That's what the paper said.
Okay. I don't read the paper. They Road 32 and 38 roundabout and 32 and River Road roundabouts. That's been awarded to Calumet Civil Contractors. And we're looking for a completion date of 32 and River Road in July of this year. NDOT roundabouts, That's partnership with the city and NDOT, 38 Logan Street and 38 Oakmont roundabouts. That's been awarded to Reith Riley, and they're starting clearing work and utility work. They're looking at construction late 23 and into 24. State projects, State Road 32 added travel lanes, that's ongoing. It keeps getting changed, but they're looking at 25 and 26 construction at this point. 32 road construction and signal projects, that's bid March of 23, and that's for the signals at 19th Street, 8th Street, 9th Street, and 10th Street. State Road 37 and 186 for reduced conflict intersection, and that's an important one that needs to be done. We've had a lot of accidents there. They're letting that bid March of 23 in construction in the spring of this year. Federal aid state projects, let's see. There's several. Pleasant Street Phase 1, construction, tree clearing, debris removal, utility relocation, waterway, and bridge and foundation work is being worked on right now. Phase 2, they're gonna open bids for it in September of this year, and Phase 3, they're gonna open bids September of this year. Stony Creek Trail under 37, it's been getting a lot of press, they're working hard on it. I think they're gonna have to wait for pavement at this point, they're pretty well done with all the other infrastructure. Nickel Plate Trail, the city was awarded $3,130,000 from the DNR funds, and we're looking at opening bid in November of this year. No, it was open November of last year, and construction and tree clearing and bridge work will start in March and April. And I think that's all I have at this point. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Peterson?
I do not.
I saw a picture of the Stony Creek Trail, it's looking good.
Yeah, they're ahead of schedule, and but they'll have to wait for the pavement, warmer, wet. I don't know about warmer than what it was today.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to finance. Mr. Davis?
Thank you, Mr. President. We met January 5th. Greg O'Connor, Darren Peterson, Megan Wiles, and myself. We discussed 2 fiscal actions with Ian Zalgowski and Jeff Spalding. One was for the 2023 general base pay adjustment, and the other one was a 5% inflation relief stipend. Matt Light and Holly Ramon discussed with us 2023 salary ordinance reversions. It was a follow-up to a previous conversation we had in December. We had an authorization for certain routine fiscal actions for 2023 with Jeff Spalding, and then an authorization to appropriate grant proceeds for 2023 with Jeff Spalding and Steve Stryker. That and the claims come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the claims as submitted.
Second?
There's a motion to approve the claims and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Previously discussed ordinances. Council to consider ordinance number 63-10-22A, an ordinance amending ordinance number 63-10-22, the 2023 salary ordinance for appointed officials and employees for the city of Noblesville. Holly Ramon.
Hi, Holly Ramon, Human Resources Director. Good evening. As discussed recently, department directors were given the opportunity to evaluate their staff for recommended merit increases. And from those approved requests, it was identified that 7 of those salary adjustments would require an amendment to the salary ordinance. This request, as Mr. Davis had mentioned, has been reviewed by Finance Committee, and if approved, will be paid through the personal services contingency. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Ms. Ramon?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve ordinance number 63-10-22A as presented.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 63-10-22A. All those in favor, actually, it's a roll call. Ms. Lees.
Mr. Ayer,
Aye.
Mr. Boyce,
Aye.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Aye.
Mr. Sparks,
Aye.
Ms. Wiles,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. New ordinances for discussion. Council to consider ordinance number 1-1-23, an ordinance adopting a change of zoning from R1 Single Family Residential and 2 Family Residential to R4 Single Family Residential for the Retreat at Morse Development.
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Denise Asherman.
Good evening. I think this is the first year I've gotten the first ordinance number, so. So the project that we're discussing is called the Retreat at the Retreat. Yes, please, sorry, I forgot.
Council to consider ordinance number 2-1-23, an ordinance adopting a change of zoning from R4 Single Family and 2 Family Residential, including a preliminary development plan for the Retreat at Morse Development.
Motion to introduce?
Second?
And I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. I am almost inevitably gonna call this the Retreat at Mill Grove once. So, if I do that, I really am not talking about Little Chicago and 38. The proposed project is called the Retreat at Morris. It is approximately 27.5 acres, located on the west side of Hague Road, north of 196th Street. Most of you are familiar along 196th and Hague Road. There are a line of 50s to 70s ranch homes. This property actually lies behind them. One of the homes on 196th Street will be removed to do the drive entrance for the neighborhood. The property is currently zoned R1, and there are a couple of existing residential structures on the western portion of the property. Those structures will be removed as part of this petition, and the rest of the property is currently agricultural. The petitioner is proposing the construction of a residential subdivision to consist of 47 paired villas, which most of you are aware that would be 94 new residential structure units. To do that, they're requesting a rezone of the base from R1 to R4 and the approval of a PD ordinance and preliminary development plan. The product that they're looking at, first I'm going to show you a layout. The product that they're looking at is similar to what they are currently building in Miller's Walk behind Meyer. And it would be these units. Something similar to this. The proposed development does include a small amenity area in keeping with the current fitness trends, which would be a pickleball court. It's on the western side of the development. They are requesting relief from some aspects of the buffer yard requirements, and those all exist on the west side of the property. So the ordinance requires a full 50-foot buffer yard separating properties. In this instance, the majority of this property will meet the 50 feet, except for there's a small portion of property that is the existing driveway for one of the homes that goes out to 196th Street. It's about 30 feet wide. They will be using it for a sanitary sewer easement. And then where these 3 parcels exist, the buffer is only 30 feet, and then the trail to get to the pickleball court encroaches on that buffer yard easement as well. They are asking, as part of the buffer waiver, our ordinance would require them to do trees and shrubs. They're asking on the northern portion of this property to preserve the existing tree canopy and then relief from the shrub planting requirement. So the UDO is very clear on size tree, existing tree, you get credit. There is no similar requirement for shrubs, so they're just asking to have the shrubs not in that area. We did have some remonstrance from the property owner to the west. They're just concerned it's a vacant property. They're concerned about people going across their property, so the developer and that property owner have come up with a private commitments list. I received it too late. It is executed. It will be in your packets for approval next time. The main gist of it is they would like a fence along that western property line. This does come to you from the Plan Commission with a 10-0 recommendation to adopt. We did have a couple property owners that lived along 196th Street. I believe one was over here, one was at the very corner. They had some concerns about existing drainage conditions within the area. There is a low spot on this side of the property. And the property owner at the corner, all the water sheds off his property to get to a storm inlet along 196th Street. They were much more comfortable after talking with Jim Hellman at Plan Commission. We believe this development will help the drainage conditions. It just formalizes how water gets off the property. And they're also not legally allowed to shed more water than they do pre-development. So that's something that both of our offices are involved in. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Do you want me to
You might
address
want,
you, or do you want me to wait for Mr. Word?
you can go ahead and wait until Mr. Word starts.
Any other,
I love
any,
when he smiles and looks up at me.
any other
Here he is.
questions? Okay, you have the petitioner.
Mr. President, members of the council, good evening. Andy Word with a land use professional law firm at Church at Old Antrim, with offices here in Noblesville at 2 North 9th Street. Here tonight, once again, on behalf of our client, Apollo Developers, with me in the audience is Neil Garadia and Ed Hamilton of Apollo. We were before you in October to introduce to you the retreat at Morris. Since then, the project has been well received by our neighbors, by the city staff, by the Plan Commission. The preliminary plan, I would say, has not changed substantially from the, what you saw in October. We have been meeting with our neighbors. We held a neighborhood meeting in I believe it was November. We met one-on-one with the neighbor to the west, as Denise alluded to, and have come up with some commitments regarding the fencing and as well as a tree preservation area on the northwest corner. Also met with some neighbors along 196th Street where we'll be needing either right-of-way or utility easements as the project moves forward. So other than that, I don't have anything to add at this point, other than to say we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Mr. Boyce?
Mr. Word, thank you. I'm glad that the stuff to the west is, neighbor to the west is taking care of their good people, so glad everything was taken out there. The, when you first came here, I was very excited about this neighborhood. I love the Feather Cove one. I think it's great there, and I think this will be a good project to it. The only negatives that I've heard are from some of the people in the Feather Cove neighborhood and also the East Harbor neighborhood, just with the result that Feather Cove is age restricted, and this is age targeted but not age restricted, and so they would really like to see this one be like theirs, age restricted. They're concerned about what will happen if theirs is age restricted and one next to it is not. So I just really would love for you to go back to Apollo, talk to them, see if there's any way we can put a restriction in there, see if there's something we can do to try and match up with Feather Cove's in that aspect.
We can certainly reach out to Feather Cove. Right offhand, I don't think there's necessarily a problem with adding to our covenants such things as restricting playground equipment, that sort of thing. If we're getting into the actual marking of the lots, I think we want to involve Beazer Homes as well as Apollo. If you guys have anything to add, please jump up. But I think hopefully we can work that out within the next 2 weeks.
Perfect, yeah, absolutely. Because I like it, and I think you're planning on doing age appropriate as we're talking. I'm trying to figure out how is the best way to put this, as John's looking at me, but, age targeted. I know that's what you're targeting and all of that, so I just know that theirs is restricted, and they're just concerned, I get it, that, oh my gosh, here comes one, and it's not restricted, how does that affect me if theirs is not and ours is, so.
Some of that, I think, is, I mean, Feather Cove was 20 years ago.
Yeah, it could be.
Things have changed in the.
If we can add
home building
anything
business
in there
since
just to go to that, then I think it'd be nice to show them that we are caring, if we can figure something out there.
then. We'll certainly reach out to them.
And obviously not put ourselves in any hot water. Thank you, that's all I have.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Right, thank you.
Okay, miscellaneous number 1, council to consider resolution RC-1-23, a resolution authorizing certain routine fiscal actions. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller, and for those of you that have been serving on the council for a few years, you'll recognize this as a recurring item that we bring up each year about this time. And basically what it's doing is kind of setting up a structure where we can meet all the statutory requirements for, all the legal requirements for all the fiscal actions that the council controls, but not burden the process with, small trivial fiscal actions on a variety of various things and keep the focus on the major issues. So it details in this resolution what those various things are that are within the scope of the Office of Finance and Accounting to execute independently, but also with the accountability that it's just good for 1 year and you can decide next year again if you want to provide the same authority. And there's also reporting back quarterly to the council to say, hey, here's the routine actions that we took. They cross a range of various things that address a number of different issues that we have to deal with. But in essence, that's what the action does and is designed to make the process more efficient.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding?
Mr. President,
Ms.
I
Wiles?
move that we approve miscellaneous item number 1 as presented, RC-1-23.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve RC-1-23. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Miscellaneous number 2, council to consider resolution RC-2-23, a resolution authorizing the appropriation of grant proceeds in 2023. Mr. Spalding.
Again, very, very similar to the last action, also something that we've been doing for the last few years, also structured on an annual basis, and also with the accountability requirement where we report back what we're doing. The big difference here and why it's broken out is it's very specifically targeted toward grant proceeds that the city receives, and then an appropriation action is a little bit different than the routine fiscal actions in the other resolution. And essentially what this is saying is if we receive a grant where the uses are tightly restricted by the grant, then there's, the Office of Finance and Accounting can go ahead, make the money available for the department to spend. We report that back to you without having to bring an action to the council to say, hey, is it okay we spend these grant monies for the reasons they were given to us? So.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Spalding?
Mr. President, I would move to approve RC-2-23.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve RC-2-23. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Awesome. Miscellaneous number 3, council to consider an interlocal funding agreement with Hamilton County for the Little Chicago Road Pedestrian Trail. Allison Krupski.
Good evening, council. Before you, you have an interlocal agreement with Hamilton County. As you might recall, we were awarded federal MPO funding a while back to construct a trail from Elderberry Road all the way to Kerrigan Road. This did originally just include a new bridge over Merce Reservoir, but in talking with the county and realizing that they that Bridge 106, which is the existing bridge over Morse Reservoir, needed rehabilitation. We thought that it would be best for the public interest from a traffic mobility standpoint and from a fiscal responsibility standpoint to just rehab those together. So what we decided to do is widen the existing bridge to add that trail onto the bridge. That way, again, we're maintaining one structure. We don't have two. The utility work, everything could be done at one time, and you wouldn't have double impact, double closure on the roadway. This ended up not just being a good idea for those reasons, but also the MPO ended up giving us even more funding at the end of last year due to the federal exchange swap. And so if you guys haven't heard of that, they had federal funding and we were using federal dollars. That is now being swapped for state funding. And so they needed to use up a bunch of that funding. So we have been awarded quite a bit of money for that project, and then any of the spillover money will also go to Hamilton County and their bridge rehabilitation portion. So this has been a really good thing for both the city of Noblesville and Hamilton County. So what you guys are looking at right now really is that agreement that states Hamilton County's contribution to this project and then how the federal money will be allocated from there. I recommend you approve this interlocal agreement.
Any questions for Ms. Krupski?
Mr. President, I would move to approve the interlocal agreement with Hamilton County.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the interlocal agreement with Hamilton County. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Thank you. Miscellaneous number 3A, council to consider acceptance of a conflict of interest disclosures. Mr. Hughes.
Mr. President, members of the council, Happy New Year. Nice to see you all. John Hughes, interim city attorney. I'm here tonight to present to you two conflict of interest disclosure forms with respect to the next item on your agenda, which is related to the Pleasant Street project. On phase 3 of the project, there are two council members who have potential interest on two parcels. One is BU Enterprises, which Mr. Boyce has some related ownership in, and the other is the Sparks family with respect to two separate parcels, one owned by Charles and Gerlinda and one owned by Westbrook Village. So Mr. Sparks and Mr. Boyce have both submitted conflict of interest disclosure forms for your approval. The rules under the state law are they present them to you, then you accept them, and then we can move forward with the decision on the matter. So I would recommend your approval of both of these. And Ms. Lees, do you prefer two separate votes or one? One vote is appropriate.
Mr. President, I move to accept the conflict of interest disclosures.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept the conflict of interest disclosures. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Miscellaneous number 4, council to consider resolution RC-3-23, a resolution concerning acquisition of real property for Pleasant Street phases 2 and 3. Ms. Krupski.
All right, in front of you have a land acquisition resolution for Pleasant Street phases 2 and 3. As you are all aware, we are planning to bid this project in September of this year, and in order to keep this project moving on schedule, we do need to start the acquisition process. So right in front of you, there are approximately 29 individual property owners that are affected by this acquisition resolution, so both phases 2 and 3, and that includes temporary and permanent right-of-way. The project limits, just as a reminder, extends for phase 2 from 11th Street to 19th Street, and for phase 3 from State Road 32 to just west of River Road. Yeah, I recommend approval of this resolution and happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Ms. Krupski?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve resolution RC-3-23 as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve RC-3-23. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 6 in favor.
Abstain for reasons previously mentioned. Abstain for potential conflict of interest.
6 in favor, 2 abstentions.
Thank you.
Transfers. Council to consider transfer TA-1-23A through D. Appropriation transfers and multiple funds for 2023 base pay adjustments. Mr. Zilgowski.
Yes, good evening, Mr. President, members of the council. So this is a series of 4 transfers that are really operating as one bulk action. We have to have a separate request for each of the funds that this is getting applied to. So if you recall, back in the fall of 2022, we passed the 2023 budget. Part of that budget was a 3% pay adjustment for all city employees. And our process is to apply that lump sum 3% to non-departmental, and then once the new year rolls around, we allocate that lump sum out to the departments as appropriate. So this is important to note that this is not a additional appropriation. It's not adding to the budget whatsoever. We are just simply taking that non-departmental amount and applying it to those departments. For this set of 4 transfers, it is a grand total of $1,103,183. That does get applied to the base budget, and there will be a follow-up request momentarily on the 5% inflation relief stipend.
Any questions for Mr. Zolgowski?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would move that we approve transfer TA-01-23A through D.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve transfers TA-1-23A through D. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Transfer number 2, council to consider transfer TA-2-23A through C, appropriation transfers in multiple funds for a one-time inflation relief stipend for city employees that was adopted in the 2023 budget. Mr. Zolgowski.
Yes, again, this is similar to the previous transfer. This is regarding the 5% inflation relief stipend that was also approved at the 2023 budget season, budget process. So again, this is 3 separate transfers for 3 separate funds, and this is for the 5% stipend. Important to note here, this amount does not get applied to the base budget of the city, so this is a one-time amount. And again, like the transfer before it, it is not an additional appropriation. There's no increase to the budget. It's just the allocation of those non-departmental funds to the appropriate departments. The sum total for this one is $1,381,370.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. President, I move to approve transfers TA-02-23A through C.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve transfers TA-02-23A through C. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 8-0. Thank you. We are at the end of our agenda. We have council comments. Anybody?
I've got a comment.
Mr. Air?
Last year ended great for me on a personal note. My daughter just had a granddaughter to the Air family. And this year started out well with my dad having his 90th birthday last Thursday. So I get personal note, but I do have to recognize those 2 milestones.
Very notable.
Congratulations.
Any other comments? We are adjourned.